Good evening. Welcome to On the Spot. You're with me, Flavia Tumusime. Now, Uganda is host to approximately 1.4 million refugees, with over 1 million of those from South Sudan alone. Now, just this week, thousands were, arrived in the country, and that is from the restive DR Congo due to the tribal violence in eastern DRC. These refugees, through Uganda's well-documented, friendly integration of refugees in the country, are hosted in camps that are dotted around the country and in over 10 districts. Today we want to ask how sustainable is Uganda's refugee policy, what they've termed an open door policy. My guest this evening, I have Honorable Musa Uchweru, the State Minister for Relief and Disaster Preparedness. I have LC5 Chairman of Gulu District, and that is Martin Ojada Mapenduzi, and UNHCR, of course, the country representative, Bonwell Kantande. This is On the Spot. Welcome back. This is On the Spot, and we're asking how sustainable is Uganda's open door policy. 1.4 million refugees. Actually, if I'm looking at the figures, we have 75% from Sudan, Congo 17%, Burundi at 3%, Somalia 3%, and the others cover the rest of the percentage. So we have an open door policy. Kudos to us. But before we get into whether it is actually sustainable, perhaps to explain to us what that really means, the structures around what makes it, first of all, the largest in East Africa and the best. We are model. Most countries are looking at our policy and saying, how can we emulate? What's the secret? Perhaps, Honorable, I can start with you.
First of all, good evening, viewers. And Flavia, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity and to share particularly a platform with some of the distinguished leaders, including my very polished chairperson of Gulu District, Martin. Polished in the sense that there are many chairpersons, but as you must have heard, Martin has won so many trophies because of his distinguished leadership as a chairperson.
He's very
of local
vocal.
government. Not just vocal, he's a good guy.
Okay.
So I'm happy to share a platform with him.
Yes.
To discuss a critical subject of our time. I want on the onset, Flavia, to say this. One, we are witnessing a very unprecedented exodus of human beings, unrecorded in the history of our civilization. That many people have been uprooted from their homes because of wars and persecution, and they have had to flee to different corners of the world. Yesterday, when I was sharing again a platform with Mapenduzi and others, I did tell the world that I have had the privilege of visiting so many countries that are hosting refugees. I have visited Jordan, I have visited Turkey, I have visited a number of European countries just to get an understanding of how they manage.
Yes.
What seems to happen is in many parts of the world, the tiers of refugees are multiplied. Uganda is unique in the sense that President Museveni and his government have deployed us to all the borders of Uganda. Our duty, first and foremost, is to wipe out the tiers of refugees. So while the tiers are multiplied in other parts of the world, and the refugees have no choice, they run because they fear to pour blood in their countries, only to end up pouring tears in the countries of destination. In Uganda, they run here because they think we can help them, provide them a second home. And that's precisely what we do.
Yes.
So we are prepared to continue receiving them and wiping their tears and repairing their broken hearts for as long as they face persecution in their country, for as long as there are warlords roaming their places of abode in their countries of origin. So that is the position Uganda has adopted.
Honorable, you said that Martin Ojada Mapenduzi is a good man.
Yeah.
So perhaps he's able to explain, just from his observations over the years, What makes us special enough to say that? I mean, what explains or informs our decision to have an open door policy? You can't say we have the most resources. You can't say that we have the biggest chunks of land sitting around unused so we can give them to refugees and not to our own. So what is it that informs our decision to have this kind of open door policy?
Well, thank you very much, Flavia. You introduced me as chairman of Golo. I am going to talk not as just chairman of Golo, but as the representative of the Uganda Local Governments Association.
Yes.
An association that brings together all the local governments in Uganda. But I'm the vice president for Northern Uganda. I'm directly in charge of Northern Uganda. Getting back to what the Honorable Minister, Honorable Musa Ichwero, just entered on, I think it's important to recognize that the world over, Uganda as a country is being appreciated for the environment that has been provided in as far as the refugees issues are concerned. And to me, this is partly because of the kind of people we have got in this country. We have got very generous people, very kind-hearted people. The issue of refugees is not something that is new, especially for some of us who come from Northern Uganda. When you look at our history, what has happened in the past, you will get to appreciate that sometimes back, majority of our people from Northern Uganda found their way inside South Sudan. They were given the reception they needed. It was a difficult period, but they were given the opportunity to live safely as refugees. And so when you see South Sudanese come to Uganda, and especially Northern Uganda, and you see people being very generous and welcoming, I think it should give a clear message that what is happening in South Sudan is not different from what happened some time back and can happen anytime, because you cannot predict the future. And so our people have the belief that it's important to support those in need. And I think that makes Ugandans unique. I have moved to most of the districts in Northern Uganda, especially those districts that are hosting the South Sudanese refugees. When you go to a district like Yumbe, you go to Koboko, you go to a district like Arua. When you go to Moyo district, actually it's even more challenging because the population size of the refugees is more than the population,
citizens,
exactly,
yes.
the citizens. And then you go to a district like Ajumani. There are about 240,000 South Sudanese refugees. And the locals are just about 230,000 or so. So the number of South Sudanese refugees is slightly above the number of the citizens. But you still see the kind of environment that is being given. And of course, I'll not forget to appreciate the efforts being made by different players. UNHCR, a very key player, and then you see the Honorable Minister and his team trying to make sure that things, the pieces are brought together to create that environment. And so we have every reason as a country to actually be proud that we are doing our best to support those in need, because the same will someday be needed. I am not a prophet of doom. I wouldn't want to leave my country.
We hope not.
No, I really do not want to see myself or my children or grandchildren,
in that situation,
any Ugandan moving out and becoming refugees. It's not an easy thing. It's a difficult environment. But it's good that we are trying as a country to create that environment. Having said that, there are things that we will probably talk about.
Yes.
And I'll bring that from the perspective of the local government. And that's partly why, for the last 2 days, as the Honorable Minister put it, we have been having discussion, a lot of discussion, because there are things that we have to talk about. There are things that have to be put right so that the good environment we are talking about can be made better.
And it also stays.
Exactly. It stays
I think you,
in a sustainable
word on
way.
that, we'll definitely hear. Would like to hear more of what you've been discussing. Now, the UNHCR spokesperson for Uganda, Charlie, actually made a comment, and the way he phrased it sort of scared me. He said UNHCR is operating in a situation where you are chronically and severely underfunded as UNHCR. Is this true?
Flavia, is it true? Because you will notice that Uganda is now hosting over 1.4 million and still receiving.
Yes.
Uganda is faced with a cholera outbreak in Changwale in Hoima district. We have over 1,900 cases, 39 people who we have lost, 36 in Changwale and 3 in Chaka. But the good thing is that together with our partners and the government, we've been able to contain the spread of cholera. We've been able to ensure that the nationals are protected. Now, when you are faced with that situation, you need more than just saving lives. And that is why it is very important really to recognize that the work that Uganda is doing is, first of all, an African tradition of welcoming strangers.
Yes.
Secondly, the refugee problem is a world problem. But Uganda has come up with a solution that is required to be emulated in other places. Uganda has not just done it because of this experience, but also helping refugees to find hope and a place in Uganda, to build their families, to rebuild their lives, and to give them a hope so that tomorrow they become good neighbors to Uganda and good citizens in their country. So we are very grateful to the donors who have been providing the resources. Of course, we need more.
So is it a question of it's not coming in, or what's coming in is less?
Why do we need more?
Yes.
Uganda has integrated refugees in their national programs.
Yes.
Which means that the development that is required in the district to make sure that they have good hospitals, that each and every refugee, each and every person living in the district has access to health, water, education. We have as crowded classrooms in the settlements as in the national schools in those districts, which means that as much as the requirements for refugees are there, of course we also need to fill the gap that is there in the host community schools. I was in Chaka not too long ago with a group of donors, and we met the chief administrator in Mchejegwa. And she told us, because the number of children in the settlement is bigger, she has to take one teacher from another school in order to help alleviate the pressure of lack of teachers in the settlement. I found that quite very touching, because they are not just looking at refugees as a different group, but a part and parcel of the district
who need that social service.
Help.
Yeah.
And it is time for the international community to come to support Uganda so that this policy, this environment that they have created, where refugees who come from broken homes, broken areas, can rebuild their lives, but also the nationals who have given up their land, who are living side by side with the refugees, can also benefit by having services that are improved.
All right, so you were actually talking about schools and teachers, and Yumbe district, which currently hosts the highest number of refugees, their ratio is 1 to 96. That's teacher to pupil ratio. That's already a strain. I'm thinking, as much as UNHCR has said that they have their structures in place, they're trying to do as much as, I'm trying to understand the government's place here. What sort of resources are being pushed, whether it's in social services that are being provided or adding on to the funding that's already there for the policies?
First of all, Flavia, the government is alive to this reality. We recognized as government for too long. I think our refugee response, not only in Uganda but globally, has been more of humanitarian than development. And against that background, we first initiated something we called Rehope. And Rehope was meant to see how best we could tackle humanitarian work with also concurrently handling some development in the host communities. I am happy to report to Uganda that on the basis of what we started here, the UN has embraced it and said, let's make it a global practice. We now have what the United Nations has adopted, something called the CRRF. CRRF is the Comprehensive Refugee Response Framework. An idea started in Uganda, but now global accepted as a practice that is meant to bring a nexus between humanitarian and development interventions, particularly in host districts.
Yes.
The beauty about it is we will continue, right, to tackle issues of humanitarian interventions. For example, what you're saying, the Congolese, the Sudanese, the Congolese, for example, some of them, because of a broken state, have never seen immunization. Children have never seen immunization. In some parts of South Sudan, a person as old as Chairman Martin has never been vaccinated on any communicable disease. So when they come to Uganda, there is a risk of really contaminating a country that we thought we had cleaned. So at the border first, we must be present. While we wipe their tears, while we welcome them, we must put in place systems that must address that. So that's why vaccination takes place at the borders. But diseases like cholera have so many things that cause it. Most of these people come when their hygiene is, they have never practiced things that are hygienic. But fortunately, while they're in their countries, they have been settled in their homesteads. Now coming together into like a settlement.
Even the numbers.
Yes, the number. You can imagine the problem. So what are we going to do now? The President of Uganda, working with the Secretary General of United Nations High Commission for Refugees, His Excellency Guterres, came up with this recent conference that we had here at the Humanitarian Summit. The Humanitarian Summit generated resources, and I also want to make it very abundantly clear to you, Flavia, here.
The resources
There's been this talk that maybe the resources that were raised from the Humanitarian Summit, particularly channeled to government of Uganda, could have been eaten. I want to make it clear.
Or might be eaten if it's still there.
Not a single cent has yet been used.
But it has been received.
It has been received. We have received some very reasonable amount of money in Bank
What
of
is
Uganda.
Very reasonable? Are you able to tell us?
I don't have the exact figure, but I am sure very, very reasonable. So what is going to happen with that money? We have developed this CRRF. We have developed what we call a steering group. A steering group that is bring on board the government of Uganda, where the Prime Minister is the chairman, the local governments, which will now bring Honorable Martin and his team, and the cows, the donors, who are very critical to us, the refugees themselves are going to participate, and then the civil society and NGOs. So those constitute what we call, and then the UN, which is of course particularly UNHCR and World Food Program, who are really the critical institutions that
At what level are they participating?
They are participating. The steering group is a national body. It is at the national. It's a national platform chaired by the Prime Minister. So we are meeting regularly. I am privileged to have been delegated to chair it by Right Honorable Prime Minister.
Were those the meetings the chairman was talking about?
No, the one of yesterday was to look at the local government raised some issues. There was some research that had been conducted by some institutions, and particularly a department in the university, in Makerere University. So they raised some issues that needed some clarification.
Right, but you're saying the steering committee.
So the steering committee is meant to like drive the policy on how these resources are going to be used. And how are they going to be used? We are going to tackle particularly infrastructure in the host districts. We are also going to tackle income generation, both for refugees and host communities. But this process is going to be the government of Uganda working with the partners, and particularly driven by the local governments.
Was there a sort of imbalance, because you've said that the income generating is not just for the refugees, also for the host communities? Because there's that, people might feel there's an imbalance where the refugees are being rehabilitated, taken care of, given all sorts of resources, and you actually neglect the host communities.
What was happening, like I said, the initial interventions that have been the practice globally was mainly humanitarian. So humanitarian work kind of focused so much attention to refugees. So for example, you would find in a Jumani, the citizens could be starving because there is a long drought. But they will watch trailers of World Food Program passing to the refugees. So they see refugees being looked after. They are hosting people, but they are yawning. But the people they are hosting, who are supposed to be guests, are the ones who are belching. So we think that was going to be, it was going to spark a problem. So now internationally, we must discuss humanitarian work concurrently with development. So the point is, local governments are going to be on board. The districts, what Chairman Martin is saying, I personally went with the minister of, one of the German ministers, Minister, I think, for Foreign Affairs. His Excellency, the President of Uganda, was kind to request, they direct me to take him to Arua, one of the camps. When we went to Rhino camp, we found in one of the classrooms, there were supposed to have been about 45 pupils, but there were 203. So the teachers told us, there were two teachers, one standing in front, one by. He said, are you doing any teaching? They said, no, we are doing crowd management. Oh. So they are mainly just engaged in crowd management.
Just managing what's there.
Yes. So we are now saying, can we do classrooms that can spread these children thin? And can we do so many things? Can we do health centers? Can we improve that? And I'm happy to report to you that that's happening. Particularly, I don't want to miss mention of what the Japanese are already leading. JICA has already concluded its assessment of all the districts in northern Uganda, and JICA said we are going to fix infrastructure. So in the next few months, we'll be discussing something else. What we'll be discussing, if, so, for example, we have good classrooms, we have good health centers, we have good roads, what we'll be discussing is the manpower. Where are the teachers now who can manage all these pupils? Where are the health practitioners who can manage all the patients? Where that is what is going to be discussed.
You know, when you talk of the steering committee, because you've mentioned that UNHCR, the Bonwells, will be part of this conversation. Martins will also be part of this conversation, and I'm intrigued. I want to ask if it can't all be rosy. It can't all be happy conversation. Yeah. I'm sure UNHCR might have reservations, maybe based on how they've worked, what kind of synergies they've had with government, with the communities, their concerns. And I'm sure it's not just one-sided. You might have also your concerns of, based on how we've been working together before. These have been our concerns, right? And these have been our issues. You might want to keep that thought, because we're going to take a short break. We'll be back there. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. We're asking, how sustainable is Uganda's refugee policy? It's an open door policy where refugees, we have South Sudan, we have Congo, we have Burundi, Somalia, and so many other countries. And we have up to 1.4 million refugees. And I'd just like to show you just a breakdown, districts and the numbers. You have the highest refugee numbers in Yumbe. You have Arua, Adjumani, Moyo, Isinjiro, and many others. So those are some of the numbers, just to give you a clear picture and breakdown of that 1.4 million. And remember, it's 1.4 million and still counting, because you're still receiving as many.
As of last week.
As of last week, you were still receiving refugees. So that number could grow, and of course, we'll always have the figures. In the studio this evening, I have Honorable Musa Yucheru, State Minister for Relief and Disaster Preparedness. I have Martin Ojara Mapinduzi, not just LC5 Chairman, Gulu District. You're saying you're also Vice President of the local. Okay. Uganda Local Government Association, yes. And you're the Deputy for Gulu.
It's the full.
Well, I am the Vice
President
of
Northern Uganda.
We are 5 Vice Presidents: Northern Uganda, Eastern Uganda, Western, Central,
and
Karamoja.
You represent Northern.
Exactly.
Well done. And we also have from UNHCR, Bonwell Kantande, who says some of these camps and the situation on ground, there's diseases, you're seeing so many things affect them. And before the break, I was saying that as much as we're discussing that there's a synergy, a steering committee, you want to work together because there's resources from all angles, and you want to sit down and see how to use these resources and how best they can benefit. And as you said, we're coming away from the humanitarian, we're now merging it with development as well. But let me ask Bonwell, if perhaps working together with be it government and any other stakeholders, what is on the ground? I mean, are there challenges not just in the partnership of working together, but even, you know, with the refugees and the communities?
Thank you. Just to first a little bit of what this Uganda model is.
Yes.
I think when we talk about Uganda model, we talk about refugee protection, ensuring that the Uganda has provided access to asylum to all refugees. There are some countries that are not giving asylum to people. When refugees are registered and given documentation, they are given ID cards, and they are able to use that to open bank accounts.
Okay.
They are able to receive money using that bank ID card. They are able to even register SIM cards. So it's not just a question of having access to asylum.
Or just giving you shelter.
Then we have the emergency response, that which we have already described.
Yes.
In there, because it's linked with the self-reliance strategy of the government, the approach is not about giving handouts. Mm-hmm. It's about enabling refugees to be on their own.
Okay.
Those that have skills, to be able to give them opportunity to use them. Those that need to train for other jobs, to be able to have that opportunity to do so. So Uganda provides that opportunity where any refugee who aspires to train in any field, he is able to do so.
Yes.
So then you have the opportunity to open businesses. For example, if you go to Kriandongo, you have a South Sudanese refugee who has opened a bakery and is employing more than 15 people. And if you go to Boyale, I'm sure that you'll be able to find some of his products in the market. Then you have the whole question of self-reliance and supporting the government, local government, to deliver services to the refugees. And that's where the development comes in. So the REHOP, which was the World Bank and UN strategy that is in place, and we have projects that have been implemented in many districts, including what government has already borrowed from World Bank, 50 million, that is already being used now, as a start, together with other donors, to make sure that host communities have their infrastructure and services improved. That's the Uganda model. And when we are talking about the Solidarity Summit on Refugees, as mentioned by Honorable Chweru, it was geared towards ensuring that we explain to people what that model is about. We had people who came from different locations and they visited the settlements. We had 4 teams that went to Ajumani, to Arua, to Mbarara, and even the urban area to speak to refugees, to speak to the locals, to find how is it working. And it was not just about raising money. It was about raising awareness to the Uganda model of refugee protection. Now, when we talk about services in the settlements,
yes,
I want to go to something that is very critical. The minister said that we have overcrowding in the classrooms.
Yes.
Now, within the refugee community, we have qualified teachers. And I want to say thank you to Uganda, because they have allowed those teachers to be part of the teaching staff. If you go to Bidibidi, we have a headmaster who is a refugee, helping in improving the quality of education in there. And I believe that if we
they've obtained training from Uganda?
If we increase the number of teachers from the refugee community, they own the delivery of services, and the burden on the government to find teachers will be reduced. At the same time, when you employ them, you provide livelihood. So they're able to improve their lives and help their families as they live in Uganda. So within the comprehensive response framework,
yes,
the United Nations High Commission for Refugees was mandated by 193 states.
Bonwell, just to
last year.
you, we have on the line, because you've spoken very well, and it makes us proud. It makes us have this open model, of course, work even more. But on the line I have Destin, who's actually a refugee leader. He's from Congo. Destin, good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
How are you?
Good.
Yes. In the studio, I have Martin Ojara Mapinduzi, LC5 Chairman, Gulu District. I have Honorable Musa Ichweru, and I also have from UNHCR, Bonwell Kantande. And we've been talking about how well this open door policy has worked and how refugees come and are settled into the country. They become one of us. They can access everything from health to education to all of that. But you are actually a product of that. And perhaps you can speak to us about your experience first.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'm very thankful for being a part of this debate today. And I'm really humbled to say hi and hello to the big people who are there. Now, talking about the integration and of refugees around, we are so helpful for the Ugandan government for the open door policy towards refugees. I have so many friends from Africa who are refugees in some other countries. Mm-hmm. And as a report we get from those people, really things are tough in other countries compared to Uganda. Around in Uganda, the policy allows refugees free movement. You can acquire land and you can buy whatever you want around. We are free to do everything we need to do. However, we still have so many challenges, and we understand the economy of the country in which we are as refugees. And maybe we are not in the Western world where everything has been catered for, and the integration seems to be easier. But we are so thankful for the few which has already been done with the government of Uganda.
Destin, just to note there, you said one of the challenges that the economy, you're saying the integration is not as smooth as you would have thought it would be, or maybe as it is in different countries that have more resources. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, yes. Like talking about the integration itself, yes. For refugees around, yes, there is that freedom of starting the work. You can work in Uganda.
Yes.
But there is at least another thing around, some conflicting laws. Refugees are being compared to other foreigners. In that, you want to start to work in Uganda, you need a work permit. And it's not easy for refugees to get it. Now, another thing is the integration around as refugees. We feel like we kind of victimize, okay? As people are deciding about what refugees are supposed to be getting. The real involvement of refugees in that decision making is still lacking. Mm-hmm. And this is really somehow we feel like something is being done without a concern of refugees, without being consulted somehow, okay, on a certain extent. It's not so that people are not consulted, but it's still done at a very low scale.
Destin,
You
make a great point there, because Honorable Cherry actually said that part of the committees that they actually involve refugees and speak, and you are actually a refugee leader, and yes. I'm assuming you are the vessel between the refugees and of course to government or to the stakeholders for information. When you say that you're involved but not on everything, for example, where are you involved? What kind of information do you give to give a backdrop for the policies that help refugees? Where does your advice stop?
Okay, thank you very much. Talking about the involvement of refugees, most of cases people are being put together during what we call the gender mainstream. It's called HDM, the age, gender, and something like mainstream.
Okay.
Now, people are just put together to get to understand what are the needs, the basic needs are people having. But the whole implementing process, somehow people get lost, you don't understand anymore until another HDM comes across. And we feel like we really appreciate the current progress which are being made. People are trying to improve. But the real integration, we really need that the management of those funds, if it's donated, let refugees get involved in the management, or they know that, okay, we need this, and at the end of the day, as we evaluate the progress or the something which has been done for refugees are still integrated or are being consulted. That one is still missing somehow, though there's some progress done.
Thank you so much.
For that, yeah.
Thank you so much, Destin. From what I've understood is that you are involved. It's just that at the implementation level, you need to also sit there so that whatever is implemented, you know how and where. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much for my involvement.
All right. Destiny, their refugee leader, he's from Congo. They have 17%. They actually make up 17% of that 1.4 million. He's said a couple of things, and I saw you, Bonwell, nodding at, is it the gender, what is it, where they ask for their basic needs? What is that exercise?
Well, the age and gender diversity is a process where we consult with all refugees, different ages, and all the communities.
Yes.
To understand their needs, but also to get their priorities.
Oh, okay.
I think I agree with him that we need to do more, and that is also something that we have identified as a need, where we need to get all refugees involved in ensuring that the quality of services is at the highest level, so that they are able to monitor the activities that have been implemented by our partners,
yes,
but also provide feedback to us so that we help in ensuring that we get the best for them. I wanted just to also highlight to our viewers that I went to Isinjiro, and in the office of the Chief Administrative Officer, I saw a notice where they say that for refugees who are marrying, they pay the same value as nationals. And for those who are not refugees, they pay higher,
Oh, okay.
Yes. And I found that very, very much interesting, because it confirms the Uganda model.
Definitely.
That refugees have similar services as nationals.
Yes, but although he did mention, Honourable, that the integration is not as smooth as they would have expected it. And then there was a comment about then the refugee IDs not being able to be used, or they stop somewhere, then work permits, please.
First of all, I want to, Flavia, again, through you, thank Destiny for being very objective.
Yes.
The issues is raising are real, but they just need clarification.
Okay.
He said they are allowed to debate on some areas, but there are some restrictions. I also wanted to use this opportunity to clarify a few things. We have allowed and will continue to allow and involve refugees in many discussions that will include things of their welfare and how they progress here. What, however, we will not allow is for refugees to get into debates that are political in nature. Political in nature in the sense that, for example, if refugees from South Sudan want to organize themselves to create a situation where they may undermine their country of origin, we will not permit it, because we are protected by the Geneva Convention that does not allow a country which is hosting to use their ground for launching some things that are hostile to the country where they are coming from.
As you're clarifying on that, I know that's actually the only exception, that they cannot take part in active politics. That active politics in the host country and as well.
So sometimes even here, for example, my refugees, and I want Destiny to take care on this. My refugees, we should be very free to discuss so many things with us and other partners. What again, I have discouraged them from time to time when I meet them, and I tell them this very frankly, the politics of Uganda, leave it to us. You know, I would not want my refugees to get involved in saying, but you know, Mr. Chweru, why are you not the Minister of Works, and you are with us, and so on. That is
someone else's business.
Someone else's. So, but everything else we will continue to discuss. But what else? As
that work permit, so they can't access work permits?
We are revising our Refugee Act.
Okay.
The Refugee Act is outdated. It came in force in 2006, but we are not witness, like what I've said, this unprecedented scale of exodus from the. So now what we have decided to do, we are coming up with a policy that should be ready in the next few months, and then an act which is in tandem with the times. We are going to reflect on a number of areas, particularly for those refugees who are maybe like expatriates or people who are qualified. How are we going? We cannot treat them the way we treat like somebody who has come from Europe, just coming to look for a job here, and we'll want him to go through certain processes. How can we quicken this person's ability to be able to quickly mix within the community of Uganda? But again, I have also assured them that sometimes, like what Bonwell is saying, while we welcome them to support us in teaching, some of them are engineers, some of them have some professions, but they may not have found employment. But that is not something that is unique to them. Employment is a challenge even to the citizens of Uganda. There are millions of graduates out there who are trying to find their level and try to see how they can fit within even the system of their own country, Uganda. So this is not unique to them. I have met their leaders many times and told them, I appreciate your predicament, but also look at our situation. So
the solution is going towards more to help them, maybe if they can acquire that job, have the right documentation to support that, not necessarily to kill unemployment, because that is, we also face that. Perhaps let me go to Martin. He said we are friendly. He appreciates that, but he says they're also victimized. So the communities, we're friendly, but there's also, you know, some factors that are not so friendly for them. So have you noticed some of these things, and what have you heard?
Well, first I really want to appreciate the kind of expression Destin made, because I believe refugees should be able to express themselves and point out the things that are not well, so that as leaders we are able to pick and look at ways of improving. So it's good. From last year, the Uganda Local Governments Association picked interest and made a lot of effort in trying to see how we can go deep down to the affected areas, those districts that are hosting refugees.
Yes.
And through partnership, we worked with a number of groups, an organization called Award. We created a partnership, and we got a researcher from Makerere University. And the work we did gave us a lot of information. Some of the things that we did not know, as of course, some of the districts that do not have this experience and they only hear either, you know, on radio or follow on television. So we picked interest and said, look, when a district like Koboko, Yumbe or Lamour have these issues, you know, it's not just one or two districts, local governments that are having issues. All of us get involved, all of us get affected. And so how do we come together and try to join them and finding solution to some of the challenges? And I want to agree with the gentleman who called. There are many things you could have not even, you just touch on one or two, but there are so many other things. We talked to one of the refugees and he said, you know what, yes, we are being helped, but there is still so much that needs to be done. And he said, we get 15 kilograms of maize per month and 1.5 liters of cooking oil and other things. This was his expression, and he said, look, this cannot do much. We need more. And
is that regardless of how big the family is?
Well, I did not go into those details, but I just want to bring out some of the things that were talked about. But from the perspective of the local governments, there are serious issues that we have had discussions about with the Honorable Minister, and we are grateful, and we saw the positive steps and the expression he made. And I want to be clear that local governments have a big role to play.
Yes.
And as long as we think local governments, should not be just about talking and say, local governments are involved and all that. We need to see local governments getting more involved. That, participation is key, involvement and ownership. There are things that the center cannot do, but local governments do. And so we have a part of the reason we have been having this discussion is to see, one, when you talk about, a district like Moyo, the burden goes back to the local government. And so the question is, does this local government have the capacity to manage such a situation? And then if there is no proper coordination, if the office of the Prime Minister, which is charged with the duty of managing this kind of situation, if there is no proper coordination, and if that level of involvement and participation we are talking about is not enhanced, then we begin to see cracks. And we think there is need for us to improve in that area. The other thing I want to point out, which it shocked me in Gulu, we did not know that there are so many urban refugees, the self-settled refugees. And these are people who are not documented. They are not considered refugees. They are not living in refugee camps. I'll give you the example of Gulu. One time, some South Sudanese came to my office and said, Mr. Chairman, we have been asked to come to your office. We have lost 2 people and we are stranded. We do not have anywhere to bury. And nobody wants to attend to us. We need help. We are told there is a public burial ground. And from that, yes, as a local government, we have to make sure we, irrespective of where you're from, whether you are Ugandan, also it's our duty to give you the services you need when you're in our area, area of jurisdiction. But I picked interest and said, but wait a minute, can you give me more information about what is going on then? That's when we got to know that Gulu alone has over 2,000 urban refugees. And these are people who came and settled, are living with the community. And the office of the Prime Minister does not have details about them. And they are more in Arua, they are more in Kitgum, most of these districts. They are settled, living with the community.
But under refugee status?
No.
Okay.
But these are refugees.
Okay.
These are urban refugees. Yeah. So one of the things we are trying to point out, and the Honorable Minister has given us a very positive feedback on that, is that there is need for us to have a discussion around that. We cannot continue saying these are people living in urban areas when they face the same problem. I have visited some of them in the areas of Badege in Gulu, Kanyagoga, where we have lost about 6 of them. And when you try to investigate, out of the 6, 4 died of tuberculosis. And then you begin to ask yourself some of the health risk that our community are going to be faced with. So there are a lot of things that we need to talk about. But the other thing that is equally key, and the Uganda Local Governments Association is pushing this, is that when you look at the law, the Refugee Act, the role of local governments is silent. And so it keeps putting us in a dilemma. You talk to officials from the office of the Prime Minister, they'll tell you this is not your mandate.
Honorable is right here.
Yes, and actually I'm bringing this right because these are statements from his technical people, and we have told him, because as a decision maker at ministry level, we need to bring this to his attention, and we have done it.
Awesome.
So when you have people who should work, with the same target of providing the services that are needed, and they'll tell you this is not your role, this is our role, and all that. Local governments are not interested in struggling for power. Our mandates are very clear. And so we need to be involved. And they're much
closer to the communities, actually.
Exactly. When the refugees are having issues with the locals, they don't run to the office of the Prime Minister.
It's Martin first.
Exactly. They go to the local government. They go to the office of the chairman of Ajumani or Moyo or Koboko. And so there is need for us to look at that. So we are trying to push this discussion so that there is an improvement in the legislation. We need an amendment. We also need to look at the Local Government Act so that there is a clear provision that empowers local governments to play an active role, not just as people who are approached in time of need, but as key stakeholders.
You're attacking the Honorable and is ready for you.
Yes, yes, he has been ready. We have been having this discussion.
Great.
And the other thing that we have
as you wind up,
yes, we have equally pointed out. You know, I'll give you the example of Moyo district. You have refugees in the camp, and these refugees are being supported by the different structures, the development partners who are doing their part,
yes.
Honorable Minister and his team doing their part, but they are, you know, there is a category. There are people who live in the nearby area bordering Uganda, have not necessarily crossed into the refugee camps, but these are people who in the day cross the border to access services in Moyo district, and in the night they move back where they feel they're a bit safe. Now, these are details that are not talked about, but at the end of the day, Moyo district local government receives the same amount of money that it's, you know, released based on the figures, forgetting some of these, you know, conditions that come up. So we are saying we need to be more proactive. We need to understand the dilemma and the burden local governments are carrying, and we need to be, you know, responsive and having discussions that are fair and doing what is needed to make us play our roles effectively.
Definitely. From what I hear, proactive, yes, and I guess in the question of accountability, you need to really, I think that's the office you need to work with.
Well, I like that statement, accountability is key.
Yes,
because
you need to.
And I want to point this to the Honorable Minister. You know, we are sometimes very disappointed with the officers you send, because when you talk to them, looks like they're not allowed to share certain information. That's wrong. These are public servants. They're managing taxpayers, you know, money from taxpayers. And so we need to open up. We need to talk. We need to share information.
If it's an open model, why not an open discussion, Honorable? But I think we'll come to you. As we wrap up, the question was, how sustainable is that open model policy? And Bonwell, you've spoken highly of this policy. You've said that you've gone to these communities, you've seen firsthand the great things that happen. But that's the question. Is it sustainable?
The solution is there. Just let me take you just one step back. And I agree with Martin that there are people who are living in urban areas where services need to be upgraded. But to do so, that's where the comprehensive response framework is key, and their participation is key. Now, how can we ensure that the services going to refugees and nationals are improved? Number one, there has to be a very good registration system where we are able to know how many, where they are living, and then plan for their services within those areas.
Bonwell, you forgive me, we have to take a break, but keep that in mind. The services, you have to know the number. Registration, I think, comes back to your office, if I'm not mistaken. We're asking how sustainable the refugee... Welcome back. You're on the spot, and we're asking how sustainable the refugee policy in Uganda is. We've had a very long discussion. I did ask, there's a funding gap. Of course, you said that the funding comes from all angles and all aspects. You said there was some funding that came in. You're going to sit down and see how that works. And I know there are many gaps in there before you pull out the money and say, here's where it goes. And we've had so much to do with the community themselves. Local government wants you to work well with them because they're on ground. They know what is going on. They're talking to this board directly. There was a call from Destin who said that there's victimization as well. And some of the things you talk about really are not implemented. They're talked about, but not implemented on ground. But let's talk about, I think they're being hashed, but let's discuss them. Abuse, you know, I mean, the highest population of refugees that come in are children, women, you know, and you hear sexual abuse reports, you hear people saying that money that is supposed to come in for certain aspects is not actually coming in, or it comes in, it stops somewhere. Actually, Honorable, you're very aware of the scandal that happened. And I'm thinking it can't just be one. There's probably fires you've put out and the public never got to know. But shouldn't you just openly say these are the challenges we face? Openly, as you were telling me off the break, that perhaps if we were so open about how the structure is and how we have our dealings, the public wouldn't question that much, don't you think?
Flavia and listeners, in every good situation, like I am convinced, and I speak with a lot of confidence in all platforms, that no amount of negative publicity will undo what the government of Uganda has done when it comes to refugees, to the extent that I've even shared with my colleagues here that my thinking and the thinking of most of us actors in this area is that if the United Nations and the international community wants ambassadors, wants envoys who can speak about refugees, they can only get them in Uganda, because Uganda, we can speak. Sometimes when I get envoys who come and speak to us, they are shy. They are shy because they know that they are speaking to people who are supposed to be speaking to them.
Okay.
Now, that's one. But that doesn't suggest at all that we are all clean.
We're not.
No, I want to make that clear, and I've said this time and again. In every 100 people who are honest, you can imagine that you will not be surprised to find 2, 3 who are suffering from an integrity deficit.
It doesn't make it right.
Yeah, it doesn't at all. You will never. And that's why, for example, what Chairman Martin is raising, I have asked some of my technical people, if we say we are doing this for and on behalf of the people, why don't we speak to them and let them know the whole process?
Yes.
Why do we go to a district, for example, and we want to appear mysterious? We want to appear like we are doing them a favor. We are not doing a favor to Moyo. We are not doing a favor to Aroa. We are not doing a favor to Singiro. We are not doing a favor to Chaka. We are not. Indeed, as far as I'm concerned, they are the ones who have done the government a favor by accepting to host these people. So we must, as a team, and we are making changes in the office of the Prime Minister, particularly at technical level, where we are going to take, this is the minimum we expect you to do when you go to the field. For example, the involvement of the local authorities must, as a matter of a must, not just be something of discussion. Like I said, we are going to say, we are going to have this, and then you local authorities, what is your sub-county development plan like? How are we going to marry your sub-county development plan or district development plan?
What does it require?
Yeah, what does it require? So that our intervention should not just be out of emotions. Our intervention should be some things that are scientific, and that's happening. Now, coming to why of late has the office of the Prime Minister
those bad apples,
suffered some setback. And again, I want to say, with all this good work that we have done globally, where we appreciated, we were not shocked because of this unprecedented scale. There was a setback in the sense that I have said, we realized that there must be some integrity deficit in the office.
But the people you hired, the people you've allowed to work in these places.
People. So what we have decided to do is to first say some of them whom we really suspect, step aside and we look into how you've been conducting yourselves. And we, for example, what we take very seriously.
Let me ask, as you explain that, do you actually train these technical people in knowing how to deal with...
No, Flavia, these are Ugandans, and Ugandans, they are from our society.
Okay.
So what we have done, for example, ask them to step aside for a number of issues that were raised. For example, this question of abuse of particularly the girl children and women.
Yes.
We take it more seriously than even just loss of money. We take it more seriously. We can afford to miss some portion, but we cannot afford to have our record as a country, which is supposed to be a model in the world, compromised, because the people we have accepted to host are going to tell us that in the process of coming to your country or being in your country, we are subjected to this very inhumane treatment. For example, how are we addressing that problem? first the investigation is on so that we can bring the culprits
and they step aside.
And they have stepped aside, some of the officers. But the other one is we realized, and I want to let the country know this, and this is in tandem with what Chairman Martin said. We realized, for example, that, for example, there were some people in Kampala here and in some urban centers who would go to the borders where people are running and say, oh, you are from South Sudan? Oh, we are sorry about your situation, but we can help you to process your asylum in Uganda. So can I take you in my car and take you to your Kampala? So instead of allowing this desperate refugee to report to a center where he or she can be received and processed through our normal eligibility assessment and be given the treatment that is he or she is supposed to, that unscrupulous person brings that person here. So the preliminary reports we are getting is that there were people who were doing that from Kisoro, there were people who were doing that from Bubukwanga in Bundubujo and bringing those people to Kampala. And when they bring them to Kampala, they purport to be bringing them to help them quicken the process of registration.
You see, Honorable, a refugee would not know who to look out for when they get to the border. So it is your prerogative to then put in measures.
This is what we are now saying. All our refugees, all our asylum seekers, they are centers. For example, in Kisoro, nobody should come to the interior of the country unless that person has been documented
at the centers.
Then when you want to become like now the group Martin is talking about, that group has already come into Gulu and it has so many challenges. I have agreed with the chairpersons of the North that in the next few days, myself and the UN and other departments like immigration are moving to Gulu. We want to fish out these colleagues of ours and teach them how they can normally process their asylum requests. That we might have to capture your records at location X, but that does not stop you from coming to Gulu to reside if you don't choose to remain in our settlement. You can come to be an urban refugee, but go through our process of registration. So that, because it is also in the interest of the government of Uganda that we know, apart from knowing the citizens we have, that we are 36, 37 million, we also know the refugees we have. But apart from just knowing the refugees, we also want to know their breakdown. Yes. It is not a secret that, for example, in Gulu, among the many people who are in the urban center are some generals from South Sudan. Now, for you to be a general, a high-profile person like that, and you have not gone through a process of being registered by the government of Uganda, department responsible, you don't qualify to become a refugee yet. You are an illegal immigrant, and until an illegal immigrant has consequences. So when I go to Gulu, I'm going to persuade them that instead of being called illegal immigrants and we treat you as such, why don't we process you through a system which allows you to go through an asylum process, and when you go through that, then you can stay in Gulu when we know that, oh, General so-and-so, first of all, is not going to use Gulu as a springboard.
Because those security checks are also supposed to check the threats as well critical against the country.
General so-and-so is not going to use Gulu for undermining South Sudan, that's one. General so-and-so may be living in Arua, but without gadgets that can be used for prosecuting war, and so on and so forth. So all those are very critical elements that we're going to really distill and make sure that they work.
You know, we spoke about training your technical people that go and then meet chairman, but I'm curious on whether the communities themselves, these are people who are coming into these communities, you don't know them, you have to give them space in your community, you have to take them in. You know, it's not just that so-and-so the refugees stay there. They're going to go to the same schools, as Bonola said. It's not different schools. They're going to marry out of your families. Yes, it's true, Honorable, you know. And are you perhaps going through these communities and teaching people how to, I know we're welcoming, we're a very hospitable country, but there must be some of us who may not understand how to take in strangers. And you've said, Martin, that this community, some of them have also been affected in their own ways. They're also still healing. They have their own healing process. So now they have to help others in their healing process. Do you ever consider any rehabilitation as well for the citizens?
Well, as we talk about helping the refugees, you cannot successfully support the refugees without considering the aspect of supporting the host community.
Yes.
You have to support both. And the Honorable Minister talked about this at the start. It is true that just as the caller said, sometimes they are victimized. There could be people, one or two, and they're there, who out of whatever situation can turn emotional and make statements that sometimes are not well.
Yes.
And this happens in the society. It's unfortunate, but you see, some of these things happen partly because of sometimes when people begin to struggle for scarce resources.
Yes.
For example, if the refugees decide to go to collect firewood, and the locals are also going
to collect
get
the
it
same
from the
firewood.
same source.
Yeah.
And sometimes conflict can begin to emerge in such a situation. But it's always important that local leaders, be on the alert and work very closely with the different players. And I went to Lamour. I went to the refugee camp in Lamour, and I met officials from UNHCR. I met the representative of your office, Honorable Minister, and there are some NGOs who are doing a good job, organizing meetings, bringing the community, bringing the refugees. They sit in one meeting.
And talk, yes.
I attended one meeting in Lamour, organized by the Uganda Local Governments Association and an organization called AWARD, and we sat together, refugee leaders and community leaders and local leaders, and we talked. They were able to raise a number of things, and we said, look, local government leaders of Lamour, these are things that are coming up. How do we work on that?
Yes.
And I'm happy that today we launched a very important project. We consider that very important as Uganda Local Governments Association. It's a partnership between OLGA and VNG, which is an organization coming from the Netherlands, where we will be looking at how to empower local governments, to build the capacity of local governments, to respond to such situations. So that much as we cannot rule out such a thing coming up, where community issues begin to grow and there is tension, we should have the capacity required to deal with such a situation. So it's
Bonwell, before the break you were talking about that question that we posed, is it sustainable? And you will. But before you do, off the break we were talking about the quality. It pains that it's true that, you said there's some posho, there's some cooking oil, and one will argue that if some we are blankets. Ugandans, and some blankets, if we're Ugandans, we've said it's an open door, Bonwell. We're accepting people to come in. This is home, treat our home as your own. Yes. Why not give them the same quality resources? There's a question of whether the quality, whether be it food or as blankets, as you said, the quality is a bit different, it's lower. Than
maybe the question you could ask Bonwell, the kind of blankets that the UN gives to refugees, can the UN themselves use them? Those blankets.
Yes.
I wanted to put it plainly.
Can they have this? Can they eat the same portion that they're giving?
The blankets is giving in a Juman, and
would he take it home?
Take now these two, give one to your wife and children.
Would it be acceptable?
Especially if it is her birthday.
Hey, but honorable. Okay.
The question that you have asked,
it's a good question.
Okay.
It is, yeah.
When we talk about dignity, it starts with that quality. So what is not good for me is not good for refugees.
Yeah.
So when we go to visit refugees and they tell us we have a problem with this type of material, we take that as feedback for us to be able to say, this type of product, where was it procured? And can we change it?
Okay.
So we take seriously the feedback that comes from refugees, be it for blankets,
food,
be it for tents, or the plastic sheet.
Yes.
When I went to Chaka, we were told by the community that during the rains, the plastic, they were getting water inside their...
Oh, the leaking.
Yes.
Oh.
So fortunately, we had our director for emergency here, and we went to see. And the question was, is the quality being compromised or not? That's the question.
Okay.
So we take that very seriously. But I wanted to come back to the issue of the local governments.
Yes.
And it's very important that we have these favorable relations between host communities and refugees. But to highlight that for the comprehensive response framework to be sustainable, the district government must take responsibility, and they are key in the sustainability of the projects. So the projects that are being implemented in the different districts, they must be owned by them, so that they can maintain the roads, they can ensure that they have enough teachers in the classrooms, but also where we have clinics, they can plan for more drugs,
Yes.
more personnel for the future. In the meantime, we have partners that are providing additional support. Okay. Now, coming to the allegations regarding sexual exploitation and abuse, every report received by UNHCR, whether it's in Kampala or our headquarters in Geneva, is taken seriously. Our Inspector General and he and her team, they get back to whoever has reported if there is not enough information, and they follow up closely each and every case.
Okay.
Now, what have we done since we started getting all these allegations?
Yes.
One, we looked at the systems. Are systems working well? Number two, are the procedures that people are using to apply those in place?
Working.
Standard operating procedures, but at the staff trained. So we need to make sure that we have good systems, good procedures, and staff that are trained that can use those systems. But the third important part of it is the investigation. So that when you have done the investigation, then you change the character and the behavior of people. In the agreements that we sign with partners, including government, we have what we call a code of conduct. A code of conduct, Flavia,
Yes.
means that your behavior in office and outside office must not be different. That's what it means.
I should stand for one thing.
One
both
thing.
at the office and outside
Exactly.
the office.
So
Yes.
we oblige all our partners to ensure that in the contracts that they sign with their staff, they have also a code of conduct
Definitely.
that govern their behavior in office
Yes.
and outside office.
Well, we do have callers. Hello? Hello? Good evening. Good evening.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Your names and your comment or question?
I'm called Jeffrey Barema.
Yes, Barema.
Hello?
Yes, Barema. Tell us your comment or question.
My question is,
Yes, your question is?
much as our door is open for refugees,
Yes.
some refugees come in as ex-soldiers from where they are coming from, and most of them are criminals. How?
Oh, we lost you there, but I think you get the gist of what he wanted to discuss, that some are ex-soldiers and criminals. Good evening. Hello.
Hello, good evening.
How are you?
My name is Harriet. Hello.
Yes, Harriet, your comment or question?
Thank you very much, the panelists. Flavia, I have two quick questions.
Yes.
The first is I'm glad to know that the Refugee Act will undergo review. How much will the academia be involved? I'm a student of refugees and migration studies,
Yes.
and we are very much interested in participating in this too. The issue of environment degradation in the refugee settlement is that my class and I went to Jumani last year. We visited Pagrinya, Numasi, and Yilo One. You know, you weep in your heart. What is government, UNHCR, and partners doing? His name are being brought on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Harriet. Those were two questions from Harriet. Do we have another caller? NTV, good evening. Hello?
Good evening. Yes.
Your name's a comment or question?
My name is Robert. I'm calling from Niombe.
Yes.
Yes, I want to thank the Honorable Minister and the representative of UNHCR for good presentation. And I want to allay the fears of Honorable Martin that the refugee actors in refugee hosting areas are working very well with local government. And if you see these new programs like Rehope, like Dr. Deep and everything, they are actually being implemented directly by local government. So that's a very positive step that we are taking to ensure that refugee hosting communities and the leadership work hand in hand with humanitarian workers to ensure that both refugees and the host community can get services in the areas they are staying.
Thank you, Robert. That was a comment. NTV, hello. Hello. NTV, hello.
Hello.
Yes, good evening. Speak up your name and your comment or question. Okay, you were not very clear. Good evening. NTV, good evening.
Hello.
Yes, how are you?
And how are you?
Your name, comment or question?
Hello, my name is Emmanuel.
Yes, Emmanuel.
I'm calling from Koboko.
Oh, okay.
And I have two quick questions for the panelists here.
Yes.
One is on this issue of the open door policy.
Go ahead.
There are two places, rooms where these refugees are settled. One is at the camps and one is the urban refugees that the panelists have been talking about.
Yes. Emmanuel, you're not being very clear, but let's take our last one there. From what I gather, he's asking about the rooms or the camps. Hello? Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Yes.
Yes, my comments may differ from what the others are saying. I'm talking about the refugees themselves.
Okay.
And my comment is towards the UN and the world community. I think there should be a solution to solve the refugee problems. One is that the minister says we wipe their tears. At the same time, he says we deny them political activities, both in their country and in the host country. But now that one is completely telling us that the refugees are not living a full life. Now, the question is, can we find a solution to this? Because the refugees are running away from government, which are not good enough. Can the UN, can the world community call these people to order? Leave alone the fact that, this is an independent country, we can't go that far. I was even tempted to say, can we draw a line, a parallel, 100 miles from the border where the refugees are coming from, let's say South Sudan, from Kenya to the Central African Republic, 100 line, let the refugees come and enjoy what they have in their country. That territory should be protected by the world community, by the UN.
Territory. Thank you so much. Okay, so and as we answer these, just to keep in mind that we are winding up, but we'll take it segment by segment. I think some questions will be directed automatically to Barema, who started us off, asked that some refugees come in as ex-soldiers and criminals. Are we able to note that? And some of them might have ill intentions. I think you had spoken about it, that you phase it out, although you said some are not harmful.
No, the truth is, don't worry about the nature of refugees. We have a very robust system, which there are some of the things that, of course, I cannot just reveal here how we work, Flavia. But the truth is, we have over the years developed a system that enables us to really put like a sieve at some of our borders, porous as they may be, to ensure that those who come here cannot undermine our security. And if there are traces of a person having committed, say, like crimes in his country of origin, there is also a mechanism. However, we have also realized, and I want to say this on the record, that some neighboring countries wanted to take advantage of that. If they have a refugee that they really want, they would pile a lot of allegations on him. He's a bank robber, so that they could use the Interpol to try to trace him so that they can grab him here and probably return him to harm. But we have also gotten a mechanism for sorting out that. As to whether the academia are involved in this, we have conducted some discussion, but I'm very impressed that Harriet is part of the team that would want to really give their input. And since we're about to consult again the local governments on the final touches, particularly on the policy, I am happy that I have taken note of this. We will see how best we can share it with some of the critical elements of our society before finally we take the policy for cabinet for discussion. Now, working with the local governments, I think the open door, that one I'll leave it to.
Yes.
I'll leave it to, But then the other thing that I wanted to say is that I think there is one thing, Flavia, that I wanted to emphasize to viewers out there. Like for Martin and his team, the local governments, I have proposed, and the Prime Minister has agreed, that everything that our technical people tell us that they have done in the districts must be made public, first for the country and also within the districts. Like next week, there is this thing he talked about, the acronym is Dr. Deep. Dr. Deep is an acronym for a resource that we got from World Bank to support the host communities. I have a list that the technical people have indicated to us that working with the local governments, they have been able to disburse the first tranche of resources to the 11 districts that are hosting.
Yes.
So we are not just going to sit on that file. Great. First, I want them to make it public in the newspapers. Then also to share it with the local governments. Share it with the local governments. Like in the north, there is this vice president of the local government, Martin here, and his district leaders, that we in the office of the Prime Minister with the World Bank have sent this money to Adjumani, have sent this money to Lamu.
As you said, don't keep it mysterious. Precisely. Share it and let everyone know. So that's going to happen next week. We have discussed it with the Prime Minister and he's very positive about it. Okay. And this helps to... So this question on environment degradation though... There is... The question of environment degradation, again, in the CRRF, the Secretariat has been mandated to prioritize working the district, the local government. So we are supposed to identify priorities. Even that's why we have not touched the money that the Humanitarian Summit brought. We wanted to capture all these priorities first. So environment protection is one of the priorities that has been noted, and the resources will go to address. Did you hear someone suggesting a territory for them? The suggestion of the territory might not work in according to the Geneva Convention. What is guiding our operations today is the Geneva Convention and other OAU protocols that govern the management of refugees. For me, I can tell you, if you asked me, Flavia, and I can say this again for the record, I am very disgusted with what's happening in South Sudan. I am not a foreign minister, I am a minister responsible for refugees. I am not happy with both the government and the rebels. Honorable Kutesa may have a different position because he's a minister, he's a diplomat. For me, I'm just a refugee manager. I am disgusted with them. If I had if somebody consulted me on how they should be handled, I would be extremely ruthless to both groups because they have subjected their citizens to untold suffering, But the question of creating an environment in South Sudan may not be legally tenable right now. What you can do, I think it was more of the exception here for refugees is that they cannot take part in active politics. And you said not here and not in their home original countries. No. What I wanted that made clear. Refugees who are here in Uganda, if they want to participate in politics at their home, then that means they will have to be back in their country. But for you to come, for example, in Gulu, then you organize... Can they be part of at least discussions to see how, at no point are they involved in any political discussions, even if you start these conversations and harness them? We try to discourage it as much as possible because of the regulations that govern refugees. We try to discourage it as much as possible. We're time bad. Perhaps that someone was really questioning the open door policy, and that was Emmanuel, who's in Koboko, saying that, I think he was saying he doubts if it really works. But you said very many great things. What was his...
Friends, viewers, the refugees are not coming here for a picnic. They are not here on invitation.
There's circumstances that have pushed them to come here.
If there is a choice, I wanted us to conclude to let you know, Flavia.
Yes.
I have an Eritrean here who was supposed to have drowned in the Mediterranean Sea. When eventually was rescued and brought here, he was brought to my office and I asked him why a normal person like you can go and board a rickety boat to try to access Europe. He says he knew that he would die in the Mediterranean Sea, 99%. But he preferred dying there than dying in Asmara.
Okay.
That's how bad it is.
Yes, I hear you. Perhaps as you give your comments, just to factor in mind, it will be your wrapping remarks as well as we're closing. We can start with you, Bonwa.
Thank you, Flavia. One of the key roles of UNHCR is to search for solutions for refugees.
Yes.
And in the search for solutions, we pay key attention to root causes. While we are paying key attention to the root causes, the question is, what do we do with the refugees before they go? So we have to prepare them so that they go back better than they arrived.
Yes.
So if they came here without education, they get educated, not just for them to be better in exile, but to improve their lives when they go back.
Yes.
Now, while they are in Uganda, all refugees must be law-abiding. There's no excuse to not obeying the rules of the country. And to be a good refugee, you must obey the rules of the country. And we do not condone any refugee to do something bad. And it is very important that as we help the country, we want to make sure that they see also the positive side of hosting refugees.
Yes.
By ensuring that they apply their knowledge, their skills to the betterment of their environment where they are living. I want to thank the government of Uganda and the people of Uganda for this dedication to saving lives, but also commitment to the international instruments. And there, we call also continued support from the international community to make sure that the protection environment that exists in Uganda is sustained. To sustain it doesn't mean that there will be enough land, but there will be enough hearts on which people can go to and get refuge and support. It means that the local governments, while their services are overstretched, they continue to provide that additional help to the refugees. We will stand with them and through the comprehensive response framework to encourage other development actors, the private sector, the governmental organizations, to make sure that they play their role, including the UN system, to make sure that those schools have materials, that all children that come to the country are vaccinated, that we are able to provide additional drugs in those hospitals, that we are able to mobilize doctors to help procedures in the areas, to make sure that each refugee has a safe delivery in the settlement, in the government hospitals. And safe delivery means that we also give them a future. The future in their children, the future in their lives, to make that the children that are born here, that they have come as young, they go back educated.
Definitely.
That is what we would like to do, so that when they go back home, they become the pioneers of developing their countries.
Definitely. Chairman, you have the pleasure of winding up this
evening. Thank you very much. One of the callers pointed out an issue and talked about support that is being given to local governments. And I want to say that, yes, there are efforts being made to make sure different initiatives, and this is the Honorable Minister, UNHCR, different people, making sure that there are programs that should be made available so that local governments can perform their duties. But as key players, and I want to repeat, as local governments, our position has always been that we need to have some reasonable level of involvement and participation. And this should be right from the design stage. When you are coming with an initiative, right from that start, local governments need to be involved. Because even if you have got very good intention, if you involve them at a later stage, the question of sustainability becomes real.
Yes.
So we need to, and this is what we are pushing for, and we will continue having very frank and honest discussion with every key player, and we want to have a much stronger, engagement with the Office of the Honorable Minister, because these are things that we cannot run away from, and we will continue pushing for that. Programs like Rehope and all that, these are very good initiatives that is going to help. But we are saying we are not yet there. There are a lot more that we need to do. And we need to empower, not just having a road and all that, but building the capacity of local governments and having clear provisions in the laws so that we have a role that is clear. These are things we are talking about. Finally,
yes,
I want to join the Honorable Minister. He expressed his disappointment. Local government leaders from northern Uganda are equally very disgusted. You can never have any meaningful peace in northern Uganda without peace in South Sudan. You will not have that. And so what goes on in South Sudan greatly affects the population in northern Uganda. And so we see the pain, but we also feel it. And we are equally very disappointed, very disgusted with what is going on in South Sudan. And we hope, as the international community supports Uganda, government of Uganda, in supporting the refugees, we hope a lot more effort will be made to have the conflict in South Sudan resolved, because that would be a permanent solution. Today, UNHCR is here supporting, but what if the conflict takes 25 years? So we need to put a lot of...
If we're questioning sustainability today,
exactly,
it might be worse. The discussion was
so
on
thank
that.
you very much.
Yes, how sustainable is Uganda's refugee policy? Apologies, we could not take every single phone call, but the discussion is just starting from what I've gathered, that you're now promising to keep it open, so that we know what you're doing. Can from discussion to... Is it going to be one statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Flavia, one thing, and listeners, countrymen, the global refugee crisis has shaken the world.
Yes.
Even the cradles of diplomacy like Europe have been found wanting. But the beauty of it, Uganda has risen to the challenge. I'm very proud to be associated with the team that has scored.
Indeed. We have the largest refugee crisis, an open door policy, 1.4 million refugees in Uganda alone. And of course, whether it is sustainable or not, the discussion is very open and all stakeholders are willing to take part in that discussion. My guest this evening, Honorable Musa Echweru, who is the State Minister for Relief and Disaster Preparedness. I had LCFI Chairman and Refugees for Gulu District. And he's been very passionate. You better work with his people, you better work with him, because I feel like that is the best solution. We also had local government. Yes. You speak for them today. UNHCR, we had Bonwell Kantande. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and good evening.